Last night I began by reviewing two possible concepts of the nature of space. One, that it is simply an abstraction and projected upon the physical world in rather the same way that we project measurements, lines of latitude and longitude, or the cutting up of another abstraction called time into divisions like hours, minutes, and seconds, which are there only on the dial of the clock. The Earth in its rotation doesn't tick. And time is, of course, seen thus simply a measure of change, of the rate of change as between two changing processes, the changing process of the clock and the changing process of, say, a person's running around. It is out of that relationship, in other words, that you get a concept of time. And similarly, through being able to measure distances in a similar way, you get a concept of space. You see, this is one point of view, that it's an abstraction because force would be lent to this point of view by the fact that space itself isn't really there. Space is just absence, and you must be very careful not, as Whitehead would have said, to reify, that is, to make a thing out of something that isn't there at all. Like saying, have an absence. Oh boy. Gary Snyder invented a corporation. It was called the Null and Void Guarantee and Trust Company. And its slogan was, register your absence with us. And so I had some business cards made up for it, which put at the bottom, Gary Snyder, non-representative. But this is, of course, Zen humor, because Zen people are always joking about things not really being there at all. The general feeling of being nobody at all, as distinct from being important and somebody, has a kind of inverse humor to it. One becomes a sort of bag of wind, and there's something about that. The Zen masters call each other windbags and rice bags and things like that, because the whole idea of taking nothingness for real is somehow funny. The other point of view that I was trying to contrast with this was rather different, and that is that just because they are so imponderable and so unget-atable, space is you. Space is your consciousness. And your consciousness is not something located in your head, although your head is a way in which it's focused. And therefore consciousness can be altered by a surgeon putting instruments into the brain. But the full range of consciousness, or the full range of the mind, is the entirety of space as the continuum in which the universe exists, in rather much the same way as images exist in a mirror. Only here, there seems to be no solid mirror. There is an infinitely permeable continuum, space. In a Chinese text called the Danjing, or the Platform Sutra, attributed to the sixth patriarch of Zen Buddhism, Huineng, he has a passage where he says that the mind is like the emptiness of space. Now, he says, if you want to realize this, don't exclude everything from your mind, because if your mind is like space, space contains the earth and the stars and the sun and the moon and the mountains and forests Good men and bad men, enlightened men and unenlightened men. Everything is in it. And so if a person wants to attain an understanding of the mind merely by emptying his mind, he's making his mind small instead of great. So you cannot therefore separate space from what it contains, because without the content, there's no container. Without the container, no content. And when you see that kind of relationship, when you see two apparently very different things going together inseparably, always find them together, you can smell a rat. For example, nobody has seen any stuff that had no shape, and nobody has ever seen a shape that had no stuff. There's a suspicion here, then, that stuff and shape are the same. And likewise, improbable as it may seem, you can realize that space and solid are the same. Only they are, as it were, the same energy showing itself under two different aspects to a being who always must see things two-sidedly, which is man. Man is symmetrical almost, you see, right down this dividing line. Two sides to his brain, two eyes, two nostrils, two ears, a symmetrical mouth, two arms, two nipples, hips, legs, you see, all balancing except the heart is a little bit over to one side. And but here he is, you see, this two-wayed thing. Man is like a Rorschach blot. He's some mess that was squeezed, folded, and then you unfolded it, and by Jove, it's symmetrical. And it's a very strange thing about that. You can make order out of almost any mess by symmetrizing it in various ways. You know there's a gadget called a teleidoscope, which is a marriage between a kaleidoscope and a telescope. And you can look at things through it, and because it's got mirrors inside at a 45-degree angle, they will bounce the reflection in a circle, which is very elegant. And the more messy the thing you look at, the more interesting it is with the teleidoscope, because it is through this balancing process of some sort of symmetry that order comes about, repetition, regularity. So the human being, then being thus two-sided, is always wanting to ask, is you is or is you ain't? Is it this or is it that? Answer yes or no. True or false? Black or white? And has very great difficulty. The more simple-minded a person is, the more difficulty they have in using their conscious attention to do anything but estimate these very simple contrasts between the good guys and the bad guys. Are you man or you woman? There can be no doubt. See, there might be nothing vaguely in between. No grays, no washes, because a simple mind wants this great precision, which of course you can't have. But as poles, you see, of one of the greatest dualities in the world is the duality of something and nothing, of being and non-being, and of course in our thinking, the solid world represents existence, and the space world represents non-existence. The conquest of space, therefore, will be the conquest of non-existence, perhaps. See, this is our great attempt to survive by being able to leave this increasingly plundered planet, go somewhere else and plunder that. That's the difference between mining and farming, hunting and farming too.